The People's Daily is the official newspaper of the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party. Today it ran this article: U.S. tries to refute rumors about its biolabs in Ukraine. But can we believe it? The People's Daily actually ran a whole bunch of articles today on the supposed risk of U.S. biolabs in Ukraine, and did basically all of the state-controlled Russian language press touting the unfounded conspiracy theory. Today, the Russian ambassador to the UN convened a special meeting of the UN Security Council, where he baselessly alleged that the U.S. was funding biological weapons labs in Ukraine. The claims were rejected outright by the United States and the U.K., which called them utter nonsense. The UN also said that there's no credible evidence that the U.S. has been operating biological weapons plants in Ukraine. But this completely ginned-up story has become major news in both Russian and Chinese media. The New York Times reports that analysts who study disinformation from the two nations said this was the first time they had seen this scale of amplification between Beijing and Moscow around a conspiracy theory. And while that coordination is alarming, and countering big lies like this is one challenge, the more immediate concern is that U.S. officials are warning that this new fake narrative about these biolabs could be Russia setting the pretense for an attack of its own. We know that Russia's not afraid to use internationally banned chemical weapons for assassinations. Russia used chemical weapons when poisoning former Russian intelligence officer Alexander Litvinenko in 2006, and again when it targeted former spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter in 2018. A chemical nerve agent was also used in the attempted poisoning of the Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny in 2020. Russia also supported Syria's government in its efforts to cover up its use of chemical weapons against its own people. I don't even know where to begin with a problem like this, but luckily we have someone who does. Andy Weber was Obama's Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear, Chemical, and Biological Defense. He was the person tasked with finding, removing, and destroying Syria's chemical weapons. He's also visited the research labs in Ukraine that are the subject of this new bioweapons conspiracy narrative. Joining us now is Andy Weber. He is a former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear, Chemical, and Biological Defense Programs in the Obama administration. Andy, thank you for being with us tonight. You have been to those labs in the Ukraine that this fuss is all about. What are they?
Well, they're public health labs, mostly, also animal health labs. They're similar to our Centers for Disease Control. We've been working with them now since 2015, or since 2005, actually, to strengthen their capacity to monitor, detect, and respond to infectious disease outbreaks to protect public health in Ukraine, and to be part of an early warning system of infectious disease outbreaks so they can be isolated before they spread around the world.
And the U.S. officials think that all of this talk about biological weapons and these accusations and this conspiracy theory may be a prelude to Russia itself using chemical or biological weapons in an attack. Do we know, what do you know about that, and what do you know of their capabilities to be on that front?
Well, I do worry a lot. You gave some examples of Russia using banned chemical weapons in peacetime in those two assassination attempts in the United Kingdom and inside Russia. So it is a very real threat. I think it's more likely that they would use chemical or biological weapons than they would nuclear weapons, even though Putin has threatened the possible use of nuclear weapons. So I think it is a very serious concern, and the playbook is very similar to what has happened in Syria in recent years, where the Assad regime uses chemical weapons against men, women, and children, and then blames it on the opposition. So it is possible that this escalation of rhetoric, which used to be sort of plants in the press in Bulgaria and the classic KGB disinformation campaign, but has now escalated to senior official levels. Even the Putin-Xi statement during the Olympics made this crazy accusation that the United States is somehow supporting biological weapons. It's known to everybody that President Nixon ended the United States biological weapons program in 1969, and it's Russia that has been violating the convention ever since.
So what do you make of this? You just made a reference to a statement with Chinese Premier Xi. What do you make of the Chinese state media echoing Russia's lie about these biolabs? What's China's role, or what's their goal here?
Yeah, it's a very interesting new development that started when the COVID pandemic first hit, and China, borrowing from the Russian disinformation playbook, accused the United States military of causing the COVID pandemic. So the fact that China is echoing the Russian disinformation is very disturbing. It's as if President Xi is acting as President Putin's poodle in this case.
What do we do when we gather information about things like this? If Russia were to stage a chemical weapon attack or commit one themselves, what should the U.S. response, what should the Western response be?
Well, I think we should continue to do what we've been doing from the beginning, which is as we get intelligence about planning for such attacks, and our intelligence on Russian military operations has been nothing short of exquisite. We release that publicly, as we're doing now, in the hopes that it will deter Putin and the Russian military from doing something horrible, like using chemical or biological weapons against civilians in Ukraine as part of their terrible scorched earth policy. But we need to call them out on it, and we also need to present the facts. And the facts are that Russia has 3 military biological weapons facilities that no international inspectors have ever been to. So it's clearly Russia that is violating the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention, not the United States.